Hello, it's Fred Dinenage again. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope I'm not boring you with the stories about television, how you get into it, and what it's like when you do get into it. I keep on saying, if you want to work in TV, honestly, bombard the TV companies with your CV, with the details about yourself. Tell them you desperately want to work in TV, whether it's in production or in front of the camera. News and current affairs is what I've always done, plus some sport. I've even done some football commentary. That Southern Television gave me the chance to cover a Bournemouth football match on one occasion. So you can do anything you want if you've got the ambition and the balls to have a go. So do have a go. Bombard the TV companies. You might be surprised at what you get. Look at all the people on TV now. All sorts of people are on TV now of every different shape and size. You can do it if you really want it. You've got to be lucky as well. And I'll tell you a bizarre story about how I came to be on a program called How, which became the longest running children's program on ITV. It started on Southern TV in 1966 and ran until about 1980 when then Southern started to lose its franchise. It came back again under TVS, Television South, as How 2, also made at the Scottish TV in Glasgow. And eventually it came back again fairly recently as How, a children's program called How, and they even gave me a little spot on that. So I've done hours and hours and hours of How and How 2 and never missed a single program. How did I get on the program in the first place? It's fascinating because, you see, I was at Southern TV. I'd done 3 go-round, a children's magazine program starting in 1964. I left that to join, after about 18 months, Day by Day, the nightly news and magazine program in the South and Southeast, produced by Southern TV. And I'd been doing that for a few months. The second in command there was a guy called Jack Hargreaves. He was a very important man there. He also presented a show called Out of Town, which was a countryside program which ran for many years, more than 20 years, I think, and was incredibly popular. He was the greatest broadcaster, natural broadcaster I ever saw, because Jack, he never had a script. He never had autocue, port-a-prompt, call it what you will. He never had anything at all. He'd come into the studio. They'd built him a set which looked like his little shed at home. He talked to the camera, he played a bit of film over it, and he just talked and talked. The show ran for about 20 minutes, and he just chatted absolutely non-stop. He was quite incredible, an amazing broadcaster. I'd never met him. And he came up to me in the corridor at Southern TV one day in about end of 1965, I would think. And he said to me, "Hello, Fred." He said, "I've been watching your work on Day by Day and 3 go-round. He said, "You're doing really well." I said, "Oh, thank you, Mr. Hargreaves." He said, "No, call me Jack." He said, "Have you ever been abroad?" And I said, "Well, once on 3 go-round, we went to Paris for a few days. That's the only time I've ever been abroad." He said, "Look, me and my wife are taking a boat, a small yacht, through the Canal de Midi, all the way through France, all the way down to Marseille, where my son's going to collect it and sail it to America. Now, the thing is, my cameraman," he said, called Stan Breo, wonderful cameraman Stan Breo, sadly no longer with us, nor is Jack sadly either. Stan Breo was his cameraman, a Channel Islander who lived at Eastleigh in Hampshire. Great character, mop of grey hair, brilliant cameraman. He said, "Stan will be coming with us. He'll be on the boat, on the yacht with us all day long, filming as we go through France on the Canal de Midi. What we need is someone to drive Stan Breo's van from point A to point B. In other words, the point where we leave, start the filming that day, to the prearranged point where we're going to meet and stop, and we'd like you to meet us there. Do you fancy it?" So I thought, why not? I mean, I'd never driven abroad before. In fact, I hadn't driven much at all. I had got a car by then, but it was a beat-up old thing. But I thought, I'll give it a go. So off we set in the Dormobile, Stan and I, and we got on the ferry to France. We got into France, and we met Jack and Isabel on the Canal de Midi. And the next day, those 2 set off with Stan Breo filming them, and I've got this Dormobile van. No sat-nav in those days, so they'd given me a map and said, "Right, we're going to meet in this little village on the Canal de Midi. Can you meet us there later on this afternoon?" Somehow, I don't know how, I managed to find this little village and find other villages as we went on through the week. I was never late, and I always managed to find them somehow. It was incredible. But when I did find them, often we were in tiny little villages, but Jack spoke fluent French, and he'd get us a meal organised, and we'd have a bottle of wine, or Calvados in his case. That was his tipple. And we all had a lovely, happy time. We really did. I mean, it was so basic. I mean, that dormobile, Stan Brow and I lived and slept in the dormobile, and it was pretty basic, I can assure you, but I was so young I didn't really care. And one day we met at some little place in the middle of France somewhere, and Jack said to me, do you fancy a bath? And I said, well, I could do with one, because there was no bath in this dormobile van. He said, okay, get your towel, a bar of soap, and your swimming trunks. I thought, my swimming trunks? He said, yeah. And we walked along the towpath of the canal till we found a little flat bit, and there were some stones there, and there were some local women, washerwomen, who were washing their clothes in the canal. Don't forget, this was the mid-60s, and then scrubbing them on the stones. And Jack walked up to these women and said, look, my friend and I were going to have a bath in the canal. I thought, in the canal? He said, yeah, in the canal. So he said to the women, do you mind turning away or just going somewhere else because we're going to take our clothes off? And they all laughed at him, ha, 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 until he started taking his clothes off, and the women all screamed and ran off. Jack and I got in the canal, had a really good wash and scrub up, and got back on board the boat. At the end of the week, Stan Brow and I drove back to England, and I think Jack Hargreaves was using that as an audition to see if I would fit into his format for a program called How, because he'd got this vision, this idea for this kind of educational fun program called How. He would do all the sort of countryside stuff in it, the fishing and all the rest of it. He'd got John Miller, who was a kind of eccentric scientist who lived then at Bognor Regis in Sussex, and we'd used him. Do you remember I told you about the hairs on beetle wigs coming from the hairs on beetles? We'd done this April Fool's Day gag on Three Go Round, the children's program, and John Miller was pretending to be the man who was doing all this. Very extrovert character. He got John Miller in mind for How. He got a lady called Bunty James in mind, a wonderful lady who now lives in Scotland, and she would do all the kind of feminine sort of things on the program. And he was looking for his fourth final ingredient, which was a slightly younger presenter with perhaps a bit of fun who could do all the zany things on the program. He'd got me in mind for that, and I think he wanted to see how well I got on with him and how well I got on under difficult circumstances while we were filming, to see if I'd be suitable for the How program. A few weeks later, Jack Hargreaves came up to me and said, look, I've got this idea for a program. It's called How. It's sort of semi-educational. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to do a sort of a trial program, a dummy program, what they call a pilot program. Would you like to have a go? Would you like to be on it? I said, yes, I would. I didn't realize it was going to be such a hugely successful program that all these years later, and I'm talking about many, many years later, nearly 60 years later, people still walk up to me in the street and go, how? And I still love it when they do that. If I had £1 for everyone who'd done it, I'd be a millionaire. Anyway, so I was lined up to do the pilot program for How. I made an absolute botch of it. But for some reason, Jack Hargreaves decided he was going to use me on the program. I'll tell you all about that pilot program next time, and how became such an important part of my life. See you then.